In a couple of weekends' time, it will be Easter. And with that, and having joined a group online doing a Bible study this week, it got me thinking a little bit about the whole Easter experience and Jesus' purpose of coming to this earth to deal with the sin problem. And that got me reading in Mark chapter 15, talks about Jesus being on the cross. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he cries out, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me? Seems a reasonable kind of question, if it was a reasonable question. Why have you forsaken me? Well, Jesus knew why. That was his agony in the garden just hours before. So why did he ask the question? It's only if we look in our Bibles, and we have Bibles with notes and so on, that we see that this is a direct quote from one of the Psalms. Psalm 22, in fact. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from the words of my groaning? Jesus called out using the words of a psalm. A song. A song that these Hebrew people probably would have known. My God, why have you forsaken me? I know that song. It starts off as a lament, and then there is a prayer, and then there is thanksgiving. I know that song. My God, why have you forsaken me? Well, with the events happening around the world at the moment, maybe some people would ask that same question. My God, why have you forsaken me? Maybe as a genuine question, maybe as a flippant kind of annoyance, as though if there is a God, then why has he forsaken us? My God, why have you forsaken me? It's an interesting psalm because just at verse 21 into 22, we get a change from this lament and from this prayer into this time of thanksgiving. And depending on the translation, and I don't want to get into the argument about which type of translation is better, they're all as bad as each other, but some might be a little bit better than each other. But we have sometimes lost in some translations. Verse 21, rescue me from the mouths of the lions, save me from the horns of the wild oxen. This is from the New International Version. It doesn't quite fully emphasize actually what's there in the Hebrew. Save me. It can mean you have heard or you have saved in the past tense. You see, this verb is in the perfect tense, and that means that it can be translated past, present, or future, dependent on the context. And as I read that, and as I know that, as I see it in other translations, in fact, if I read you, the New Revised Standard says, deliver my soul from the sword, my life from the power of the dog. That's verse 20. And this is Psalm 22, verse 21. Save me from the mouth of the lion, from the horns of the wild oxen. You have rescued me. It's in the past tense. There's suddenly this cry for help. My God, why have you forsaken me? And save me from this and say, there is this lament, and then suddenly, but you have saved me. I'm just going to switch to the King James Version. Save me from the lion's mouth, for thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorns. Yeah, who knew that the King James Version had unicorns in it? Anyway, that's just the way that they translated the horned wild animals. Save me, for thou has saved me, thou has heard me. So there is a realization, a cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then partway through this psalm, a realization, but you have saved me. I did a Bible study group online this week, and we were looking at a couple of stories in Mark chapter 8. We're following Christianity Explored series. And Mark chapter 8, the way that the study takes us, it dips into, first of all, the little story of Jesus in Bethsaida. And he heals this blind man. And he says, can you see? And the blind man says, well, I can kind of see, but people look like, well, trees walking around. He can see, but he can't fully see. And then Jesus heals him fully. And he goes away and everything's fine. There might be some other aspects of that story that we could draw out. But I find it interesting that it's just before Jesus takes the disciples away to Caesarea Philippi. And then he asks them this question: who do people say I am? And they start listing off. Oh, some say this, some say that, some say the other. And then Jesus says, but what about you? Who do you say I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one. Jesus sort of goes, drop the mic moment. That came from God. You didn't learn that from other people. That is something that God has revealed to you. And then in Mark chapter 8, Jesus goes on to explain to his disciples, and it seems as though there's more people there as well than just the 12, but he goes on to say, this is what's going to happen. This is the plan, guys. I've come here to die. And it says that Jesus said that clearly. And it doesn't seem right. It's not part of Peter's plan. And while Peter reprimands Jesus, Jesus then looks over at the other disciples. You know, the way that you're having a conversation with someone and you kind of keep looking over to someone else or a group of people as though, come in on the conversation. So Jesus turns to the other disciples and then he turns back to Peter. And he says, get behind me, Satan. If this is your plan, this is the wrong plan. Get behind me. You see, Peter could see who Jesus was, just like that blind man could see partially, but he couldn't see the whole picture. Jesus was trying to tell him, look, this is what it's going to look like. And Peter didn't really want to accept it. Then in Mark chapter 8, verse 34, it says, then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, and for the sake of the good news, you'll save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in this adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Jesus was saying, you got some of the picture, but you haven't got it all yet. And I want to tell you my purpose for coming here to this earth. My God, why have you forsaken me? Maybe it's a question that some people will call out in their time of need and despair and disappointment, maybe even grief, especially at this time of this global pandemic. My God, why have you forsaken me? It's a question of, where is God? Has he actually turned his back on us? Are we going to give up ourself and our selfish ambition for a wholehearted pursuit of Jesus? Even if it means giving up something, are we going to give up in order to gain? And what if everything goes wrong? What if life isn't always rosy? What if we find ourselves, at least metaphorically, on a cross? What if we find ourselves in some dark valleys? What if things get really rough? Matthew 24, I know I've preached about this before, talks about talking about believers, how many will turn away and be distracted and caught up with other things. The love of many, most, will grow cold. That's the fourth part in that sequence. And just as we think that everything is getting really bad, that's when Jesus says, but at this point, the gospel will go to everyone. It seems bad, but it suddenly gets good. Just like the Psalm 22. It starts off bad, but it gets really good. It's easier to give up, though. When things seem to be really bad, it is easier to give up than continue to praise. But that's what this psalm invites us to. And that's what Jesus invited us to there on the cross. Just when everything seems really bad, I'm going to sing and I'm going to praise no matter what. Because true followers don't give up. True followers praise anyway. You see, it's in that realization in Psalm 22, and realizing, but God has saved. That verse 22 of Psalm 22 is suddenly flips. Suddenly, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then realizing, but you have rescued me. Verse 22, therefore, I want to put a therefore. It doesn't belong there. It is not there in the original, but I'd love to throw in a therefore. Therefore, I will declare your name to my brothers and sisters in the congregation. I will praise you. It's like the whole psalm and Jesus referring to the psalm, saying, even though things are really bad, even so, I will praise you. So we may feel as though we go through some dark valleys, but the psalm next to Psalm 22 talks about that. Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. God doesn't promise us that we won't go through dark valleys, but he does promise us that he'll be with us. So when we are in those dark valleys, whether they're anticipated, where we suddenly they're upon us, what will be our reaction? My God, why have you forsaken me? Yeah, but you saved us. You saved us. You saved me. Therefore, I'm going to praise you. And I'm going to praise you. And I'm going to praise you. Let me pray with you. God, we ask for your help. We may go through some difficult times, but we ask that you help us to realize that though we may feel as though you have forsaken us, you never will, you never have. Lord, help us in that moment of realizing that you are still with us, that we will praise you, and we will praise you, and we will praise you, because everything of this life is meaningless. We need it in context of what will come. What is the point of us gaining everything here if we lose out on our salvation, on eternity? Those were the words that you said to those followers, and they're the words that you say to us now. So Lord, help us, despite our difficult situations, to say, even though, even so, even though things are bad, even so, I will praise my God. Lord, help us to that end, we ask in your name. Amen. See you next time. Stay safe. Stay saved.